Welcome to CGT Square Talk, where top experts in the industry share their groundbreaking journeys. Brought to you by Blue Squared, your strategic digital partner.
Nice.
All right. I love Grace.
That's a compliment.
It is. I'm going to send her some chocolate or something.
Hey guys.
Gina.
How are you?
It is great to see you. Good to have you. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to chat with us. I don't know if you've ever met Armen before. Armen Gasanyan.
No. Hi, Gina. It's nice to meet you.
He's kind of head of our customer success up over here, kind of in the US. So, and we do this together. So welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, cool. So I want to just kind of ask you, we obviously did a little research. We checked your LinkedIn and all that, and you went to Rutgers in IT, and you kind of started on the technology side of the world, right? And how did you get from there to kind of where you are today in the product management, kind of a lead product management role? What's that path like?
Yeah, I mean, where I work has been a great place with lots of different opportunities and career growth and development options. But I mean, honestly, I think as with everything, I mean, it always takes hard work, talent, and a lot of luck. So for me, luck has been on my side, and different people and my contacts and networking and just staying connected with people has really kind of helped me in this journey for sure. People that have been in my corner, mentors, old managers, and just, staying connected. So, people contacting me about the roles, and honestly, even me looking at the roles, I'm like, yeah, I don't know that I want to apply for that. I don't know if I'm ready for it, or I don't know if I'm fully qualified for it. And at the same time, I said, well, if not me, then who else?
Right.
So what's the worst they could say is no.
Exactly.
And if you don't ask, it is a no. And so I just always said, and then the best case is I get an offer and I can always turn it down if I don't want it. So
exactly. Cool.
Yeah.
So, but how different is the role? Because kind of starting from an IT or tech, because you did a lot of kind of on the, let's say, more technology side to what you do now. How different are those roles?
Yeah. I mean, in cell and gene therapies, it's the autologous products. I learned a lot on the IT side. And yes, I was implementing on the IT side, but I was in all of the business meetings. I helped map out every single business process that there was. So starting from order management all the way through revenue recognition and everything in between, talking about, regulatory and quality, and manufacturing was always kind of a black box because we never really had to worry too much from that perspective. But MES, LIMS, materials, you had to really get involved in all of the different aspects, and even in clinical, right? I wasn't really involved from a clinical perspective in the beginning. I started in commercial, but you had to understand what was happening in clinical. And with CAR T therapies and autologous medicine, it's not much different, right? It's not so drastic of a change than, bigger normal pharma drugs, large molecules, small molecules. But CAR T is really, when it's clinical, it just shifts to commercial with the same supply process.
The role that you have now, how does that, what's that like? It's kind of a new, you've been doing it a little while, but.
Yeah. I mean, it's been about a few months, 6 months or so, a little bit longer. But it is very different than where I was. So my prior role was kind of just switching from what I did in IT to take the opposite role for what's on the business. So everything I used to throw over the fence to my counterpart to say, hey, this is your problem, go fix it. Then I had to manage and make sure. So it was a good learning experience on that side as well, learning the different aspects of supply and how to deal with the manufacturing teams, more so on, from the back end rather than on the IT side and development. But, then switching from that role to this role, it is quite different because right now what I'm doing is managing things that are above site or that cross sites. So if there's I have a project portfolio, managing all of the projects that are happening at the sites that both sites are implementing. So, manufacturing process changes, application changes, quality changes, everything, whatever is happening that affects both sites is managed from my perspective at the portfolio level, along with what we call integrated business planning, which is, a typical sales and operations planning process that falls within my responsibility today. So, there's things like comparing the sites and KPIs and seeing, which is operating in which way, try to learn best practices from one another and try to implement, both, try to switch it between the different sites to say, hey, this site's doing this really well. Why don't, can you implement this, or what's so different about your site that you can't? And there are different, as much as the processes are the same and they're both moving, there's aspects of the sites, such as the physical, locations of different things in the site, where the lab is versus where the warehouse is, that make slight nuances in the process. So not everything can be exactly the same, but you try to learn at least as much as you can from one another.
So kind of a continuous improvement based on how things are operating in different areas that you've.
Yeah. And collaborating and getting outside of your own comfort zone a little bit.
Right.
So would you say it's more strategic, right? As opposed to the execution side?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and we're looking more 2-3 years out, where everything from my prior role was really like in the next 6 months to a year. Now people are, mentioning 2027 and 2031, like it's tomorrow.
Oh my God.
And you're like,
that's scary.
Yes. I'm like, wait a second, hold on. I think my kid's going to be graduating high school then. No.
So from a strategic side, obviously you got to prioritize in a different way, right, than an execution side. So are there anything that you can maybe share that some of our listeners that can gain some knowledge about how, like what are the specific strategies do you use to, in such a fast-paced environment, to get the strategies in place looking forward, like you said, 5 years down the road?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard, especially in CAR T and autologous products, because the demand and the supply and the capacity utilization, it's very dependent on the patients that you have at the time, right? And we're talking about, extremely ill patients, and, there's only a certain market share for these patients, right? And, of course, you prefer not to have any of these patients at all because, people's lives are really being impacted. But, when you're really thinking about, in a few years out, what is that strategy? How many manufacturing facilities do you need? What locations do they need to be in? How many patients are going to be coming from each of these different locations so that you can get these medicines and therapies back to them as soon as possible, right? I mean, those are the things that you're really trying to think about and consider, as well as having multiple options for the raw materials that are coming in. CAR T, we were the very first to start off in this industry, really, or one of the first, I should say, at least. And there was not a lot from a materials perspective that was around. And you're acquiring materials, from different companies, and sometimes they're your only supplier and you don't have options. So these are the other things, as the industry continues to evolve and grow, and there's many more competitors in the space and lots more startups, what other companies are coming into this space that are able to provide you with different materials at better price points, et cetera. So really thinking about and trying to negotiate those contracts now, and even influencing new vendors to be in the market in those spaces, right? Where you say, listen, I've only got one supplier here. Can you, is this something that your company might be interested in investing in to kind of provide some competition in this space? I mean, you talk about the couriers, and there's kind of the big couple of couriers, and then there's, some smaller ones that are trying to come in, but, there's a
nobody's really jumped onto that yet, have they?
And it's a lot of time. It's validation, right? I mean, everything has to be validated. So, you're talking about, okay, it's going to take me 2 years to even change vendors in certain spaces, right? Other spaces, it's not so much.
Do you think
where
they're
can
kind of
buy
waiting to
material.
see? Do you think they're like, well, okay, this is new, we're not so sure? Do you know what I'm saying? Are they
From the
kind of,
courier perspective, you mean?
well, or any of these,
In
let's say,
general.
third-party vendors? Because what I'm hearing you say is that you're able to kind of strategically plan better now because there are more people in the space than there were, several years ago. But are they still not quite, haven't fully kind of, decided, yes, we want to jump in with both feet?
Yeah, I think it's probably, I mean, it might be some of that, but I think there's a lot of like, you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
And there's vendors that create a product and you don't even know that you're the only vendor out there, or other vendors don't know that that's what you're supplying. So, I mean, we have one material that I can think of right now that is literally a mixture of sugar and water. We have one supplier.
Oh, really?
There's no other supplier.
How funny.
You'd think it'd be like,
Yeah. It's
an
easy to
off-the-shelf
make,
kind of
right?
thing. Yeah, but it's GMP. You have to have it. It's registered in your dossier, et cetera, et cetera. And so
I would think somebody in food service should be able to provide that.
Yeah.
Because they also have to be a little careful with it. But that's interesting that's.
But they have to then be GXP, which
Right.
the food industry is not today.
Right.
Here in the US anyway.
Yeah.
So do you, sorry, just without getting into any specifics of what you're doing, just from your opinion only, do you think that, because you hear a lot about people heading or thinking more about allogeneic as opposed to autologous, do you think that is easier to plan for and what people should be thinking about in that? Or do you think that's not, and what's your opinion on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any easier, to be honest.
Mm.
I mean, you've got, whether the donor is coming from yourself or coming from a different person, I mean, somebody still has to do the extraction. They still have to store the material somewhere, and it still has to be shipped to a manufacturing facility,
Right.
wherever that might be. And so, I mean, I think, if it were, something that wasn't even from a donor per se, maybe a different story, but I don't think it really matters if it's coming from the same person or not, except the fact, I guess I should say, as I'm thinking through this, except the fact that an allogeneic donor will be probably in better physical shape,
Right.
than the people that, that we're getting
Healthier.
from when they're a patient. Yeah.
Easier to get
So-
the material, right?
and maybe easier to schedule and things like that. But ultimately, it's not going to reduce turnaround time. It's not going to reduce, the shipping burden, the time it takes to get, from where to where, and or the state that the material has to be in, right? So some companies are frozen, some companies are fresh, but whatever it is, the manufacturing process relies on that state of the material. So it's not going to change it's not going to ease the burden on the logistics side.
Right.
Regulatory. You touched a little bit about regulatory side, and obviously highly regulated environment. How are the regulatory bodies in this time adjusting? Are they fast enough to adjust to this new way of manufacturing, or are they being like we all know, regulatory bodies are usually very slow, right? To follow. So are they playing game of playing, kind of catching up with an industry, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are, and they're doing their best, right? We're all learning. It's kind of like being parents in this new social world too, right? It's like everybody's trying to adjust and learn, and some people are better at it than others. But they're trying, and they're trying to at least be consistent, and they're trying to make sure that, what we all would want for our kids and our fathers and our mothers and our sisters and brothers, we want to make sure that they're making sure that the therapy is safe and has the proper efficacy. So, and making sure that they're being made in the proper way, right? And this is where all of our validation, starts from. So, they're being cautious, but they're also, they are trying to move as fast as possible. I mean, I don't think I've seen as many FDA priority reviews or any health authority priority reviews being accepted as much as they are today.
Right.
So if there isn't a standard of care in the market, they are trying to push as much as they can, because there are some spaces where there's very few patients, but there is a need for those few patients, right? If that's your mother, for example, that's
Yeah.
the one that is this patient, I don't care if she's the one in 150 million, she's the one. So, make sure that there's something there for her, a clinical trial, something. So I think they're trying, but they're also being as cautious as possible as well, right? I mean, where there was a couple of months ago, some issues that were popping up from a CAR T therapy perspective, and there was a whole bunch of news about it, and they kind of backed down quickly thereafter after they realized, okay, this isn't necessarily CAR T based. So they want to get information out to the public, but they do have to be cautious about it, because you don't want to cause chaos.
Right.
But you also don't want to hold back information. Yeah, you don't want to, but you also want to be transparent that there are potential issues. So, I mean, in any patient therapy and indication, there's all different aspects of it, and there's a lot of clinical trials out there that people could participate in, and for us, there needed to be that one that was willing to move forward with it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have it today. So I know who that person is, but I won't say their name. But we're very thankful to them. And I think all of the patients are, really, more so than anything.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. This is the one area where I think everyone has a touch point, right? They know somebody or have a family member or friend who's dealing with the, well, especially on the cancer side, because obviously there's a lot of research going on in all aspects, right? Of cell and gene, if you want to call
Lots
them
more indications. Yeah.
Yeah. From disease to all sorts of stuff. So whether it's your current kind of situation or your past, what are some of the challenges that you see, and are they different from, let's say, a larger pharma to, let's say, somebody who's smaller, who's trying to get things off the ground? Maybe they're still in clinical. Well, they probably are still in clinical, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think definitely the challenges are different between startups and big pharma companies. I mean, just mainly the processes and the procedures, right? And I think also you think the health authorities expect more from the large pharma companies too. Right. They say, better than, XYZ, whatever it might be. But I mean, I think the challenges, though, aside from the health authority ones that could be a little bit different because expectations are set a little bit higher, then I think it's different purely from the number of people that are involved, right? So in a smaller startup, it might be, 30, 50, 100, but in large pharma, you've got all these different groups and organizations and departments and, people that are deciding what's happening that might not necessarily be 100% involved, right? They get the information that they have, they make their decision at the time with the information that's provided to them and, for the shareholders, right?
Right.
So,
well, not to be too provocative, you made me think of something, because what I've run into at the bigger pharmas is that, so cell and gene to me is kind of like it's a little startup within a bigger organization if you're dealing with a larger pharma, right? And it has to work a little differently. It has to be dynamic because, as you say, the process changes, the science can change pretty quickly also, and then your process has to change. And some of what I've seen is because they have processes and protocols in place, they're like, well, that doesn't quite fit with how we always do things, right? And then there's a challenge, at least that we've run into, in getting that kind of installed base of thinking to change, to be able to actually better support the cell and gene side. I don't know if you've run into that at all.
Yeah, I mean, of course, when you're talking about again, trying to be a startup in a large organization, it is different, and it's different in each large organization, right?
course.
Because it's all about the way that the senior management sees it, the investment that's there, how much of a priority it is, but more importantly, the organizational structure. It really dictates a lot. As much as you would think, hey, we just because I report through this organization, I'm supporting cell and gene, you think that they would just concentrate and do what they need to do. But there's a lot of times where, because I'm reporting through X organization, these are our priorities, and they don't really align with your CGT priorities. So if I'm going to focus on something, I'm going to focus on, my line functions priorities and not CGT's functions. So, it's been through, I've been where, CGT has been its own business unit, an organization, and I've been where it's been integrated into the larger organizations. And it is really, it's really eye-opening how things change just because of an organizational structure. You wouldn't have thought it, and I wouldn't have thought it, but it really does impact.
So when it's its own business unit, does it have all the different functions inside of there? Or like, for example, on the technology side, there'd be testing, validate, there'd be all of that validation and regulatory and what have you. Are they buying those services kind of from the larger organization, or is it all inside? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a mixture. I
guess my question is, what do you see as the most optimal organizational structure to really, if you really want to gain traction in cell and gene?
Yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, it's based on the organization itself and how big or small it is, for sure. Mm-hmm. In a larger organization, you get the economies of scale by not being so siloed and being aligned into those functions. The challenge or the opportunity really is the education that it requires of those organizations. And so it really needs to be on the individual that's representing CGT within those organizations to make sure that they are helping educate them and understand what it is that CGT really requires, how much collaboration it requires, because of all the different touch points, and really just making sure that from a communication perspective, everybody understands what it is that we have to do. It might not be the highest priority, but the work still has to get done, and we still have to bring in revenue. So it still needs to be, it needs to have a certain focus. So, but aligning on priorities, I think, is really key.
So that means, means the CGT organization has to have the alignment, but then it also has to be aligned across the larger organization, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so, one of the things that I was going to answer when you asked the question before about the differences between large and small organizations, and I say not much at first, because communication doesn't matter how big your company is. You need to make sure that you know who your stakeholders are and that you're aligning. I always say, like in real estate, they say location, location, location.
Yeah.
In large pharma and in probably any pharma, it's align, align, align. Because if you don't have the alignment with your key stakeholders and anybody that you need in order to have your back to help you kind of push your business case, you're not going anywhere.
Right.
And
you're going to create
doesn't matter how big or small the organization is. Yeah. If somebody's not behind you and you need them to be behind you, it doesn't matter.
Right.
One person can stand in your way.
Which goes back to your comment about, and this is true in any sense, management has to really be bought into it. If you're going to do it, you've got to commit, right?
Right. In the great business case, and a return on an investment is really what will push you further. But
this is harder, right? Because isn't this still kind of new? I remember when a lot of companies were investing in China back a long time ago, right? Because it just got opened up, the market was new. They really weren't making money, but they did it because of the future potential revenues. Isn't kind of cell and gene a little bit the same? It does feel like this is where things are headed, and you kind of want to play, or you might get
Yeah,
left
I
out
mean, and
later down the
it
line.
is an expensive business.
It is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think there's some of the big companies are choosing not to be in this space, or going very slowly in this space, and some are head first. So it really does depend on your overall strategic priorities as an organization. But for sure, you either want to take a big bet or you don't, and that's why I think there's either a lot of the big pharma are trying to purchase companies to get into this space rather than investing from scratch, or they're kind of maybe investing from the side and you don't really know, but they've provided just some investments into organizations that are trying it and seeing what happens. And then if it makes it, it makes it. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But there's been a lot of acquisitions, in this space, right? I mean, so
Yes.
it will continue. It's just it is a big bet, and so it may not pay off. I mean, some of it is, but from a pure patient perspective, it's expensive. The technology hasn't caught up yet. And at some point, we all hope it does, right? Because we want it to be offered at a much lower price point. But it's going to take time, and we need other companies, even equipment making companies, analytics companies that are coming up with the testing and how you do all these different types of sterility and potency testing. It takes a long time. And if we have equipment and testing that can come up faster, then it's going to make the entire chain less expensive. But it is very expensive right now. So you do have to have a decent backing, and somebody had to start off and betting on it.
Exactly.
I want to actually continue on that thought from the technology perspective and being faster and being coming up to what we want the industry to be at. Do you see AI and data mining playing a big role in the future for allowing, for example, testing to be faster, if that's what we want, or the data to be processed faster, or even technology to be better in the way?
Yeah.
Are there thoughts in the industry?
I mean, from an industry perspective, absolutely. I mean, I think AI is probably the biggest buzzword of 2024.
Oh my God, you're so right.
From all of the major companies. So yes, I struggle with it though from a testing or analytics perspective. I mean, because AI and ML is all about learning, right? And everyone's cells and the testing of them are all different. So you can't predict what somebody's cells are going to be like, either the incoming apheresis or once they're completed afterward in a final product, right? I mean, we check all of our products for different types of diseases or bacteria before we manufacture it. Now, we test for tons, and usually we never find anything. Right? But the one time it does is, again, the one time it does. And you need to make sure that you have your processes and procedures around that. So for some algorithm to guess from a testing perspective, either incoming or outgoing final product, I don't think really would help from a CAR-T perspective. But, in looking at, I would say, from a different data perspective, when you're looking at maybe from a clinical trials side of things, or what types of patients from a background perspective and how many different therapies they've gone through before they're now where they are. What types of patients, whether it's age, demographic, any of these markers that could say, okay, this person is a better fit for this, this therapy than that therapy, right? I mean, as much as all the CAR-Ts are the same and the process is the same, they're different. And they have different efficacy and they have different safety, but they're also offered in different lines of therapy. So, to give some HCPs information about, again, demographics and all of this stuff where FDA and other regulatory authorities are requiring tracking of the patients for, 30 years, right? To see how what happens with them
Mhm.
after,
Yeah.
you know, yes, we can use that type of data to try to help predict in the future. But specific to CAR T and testing, I don't think so.
Fair.
Be
Absolutely fair.
interesting, but
Yeah,
I'd love for somebody to invent something that we could.
more like not predictive, but more of current data processing, whatever current data that we have, probably be able to get faster. But
Yeah,
very
I mean,
fair.
our current analytics, it just takes days. It takes days to produce results. So
Yep.
what do you do in those days, right? I mean, if we can get those results not in days, but in hours or, you know, whatever, I'm gonna say minutes, but you know, I mean, we've got, you know, you've got your normal like flu tests, right? You take the flu test, they've got a 10, 15 minute quick rapid one. Same thing with COVID and, you know, strep, right? You can take a quick test. It'll kind of give you your general direction of where to go. But if you really want your results, maybe you need to wait an extra 3 days, 4 days.
Right.
But right now we're waiting 5 or more.
Interesting.
Yeah. It would all be trying to get the material back to the patient as fast as possible.
Right. Right. Any advice for anybody who's kind of headed down this road in terms of some of the strategies that you're implementing, or you know, what should people look out for?
What advice would I have for somebody getting into this? I would say, one, know your market and understand the demand, because it is not linear. You're not going to get, you know, your X amount of patients every single day. It's just
Right.
not going to happen. And so knowing really what you're getting yourself into, and, you know that, you know, the commercial teams always have the best intentions and the upside, but it's the manufacturing that has to actually employ the people to execute for that demand. And sometimes those things don't match up. And like I said earlier, it's pretty costly when they don't. What keeps me up at night? I would say people. And making sure that they are understanding of their worth, know that they are valued, and trying to continue to inspire them and keep them going and motivated. Because, and I really don't like the word motivated, I like inspire, because you know, you can inspire somebody. I think motivation comes from within. But you know, it's really hard in this space, and there are so many setbacks and so many things that take a really long time and a lot of failure. So, you know, making sure that people know that that's okay, want to come back the next day and try again.
Right.
It's, you know, or, you know, even accomplish something. And it's like, oh, that you did such a great job. You did that. You accomplished it, done, delivered. Yeah, you don't have time to celebrate, because now guess what? This other project is still 3 weeks behind and you need to help us catch back up on it. And it's like,
Right.
switch focus and just start back again. There's no recovery time, at least from where I've sat in the many, many years, and 9 years now, in the CAR T space. There's never like, okay, great, sit back and enjoy your delivery. It's get back going again, because there's always something that needs to happen.
So you really got to be careful of burnout, is what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely. Me. And just making sure that, again, people know their worth. And it doesn't mean, you know, necessarily, you know, helping them find some other place to go and work. And it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, reward and recognition either. It's really just creating a team atmosphere and mindset so that people can help one another, you know, because everybody's going to have bad days. Everybody comes into work with something different from behind, and, you know, they need their collaborators, their partners, their teammates to help them pick up the slack in those days, and not be like, well, you're having a bad day, but, you know, that's on you to deliver, kiddo, you know?
Right.
So, you know, just making sure that there's really a team atmosphere that's happening, that, you know, everybody's lifting one another up and keeping it going. Because there isn't one leader. It's not your manager. You know, nobody's calling you every day to make sure that, you know, little Johnny didn't throw up in the car on the way to school, and that you're having a good day and nothing's happening with mom and dad. And, you know, So it's really making sure that you stay connected with other people. And that's the thing from my team's perspective that I always try to say to them is stay networked, always stay connected, and not only on the professional front, but more so on a personal front, because if they know some things that either you're going through or whatever, they're more likely, if it's not like, hey, I got to go pick up my kid from school today. Can you pick up the slack on my project? Yeah, sure. That might be okay every now and again, but it's going to be a consistent, networking and conversation with people for them to, just want to help you innately, when coming in from a bad day. Hey, let's go walk and have a cup of coffee. Let's go get a, water. Oh, you start a meeting and you're like, oh, you don't look so good. How about we take this meeting outside? Let's go for a walk. Let's, and little things that people notice are sometimes really helpful. And you don't even really know that, you've impacted somebody as much as you have.
Well, yes. I think
Sorry, that was heavy.
No, that's like an excellent note, because you kind of tied it all together from, having management bought in and make sure that the team is well supported to alignment. It kind of having that team atmosphere. I think that really was a great kind of summary of some of the key points you talked about.
Yeah.
And we're well over a half an hour. So I think that was a great last point to end on. So Jena, I wanted to thank you. Sorry, Armen, I cut
said
you off.
very insightful. Thank you.
Yeah. So Jena, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you spending a little time chatting with us, and it's been a lot of fun, at least for me.
Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I was a little nervous, to be honest. My first podcast, but you guys made it easy. So thanks. Appreciate the questions.
Excellent. You. All right. Well, we'll see you soon. We'll talk to you later. Have a good weekend.
Thanks so much. You too.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, I thought Jena was very insightful. I thought she had a lot of interesting things to say. I do think that whole concept of having, executive buy-in and support, and then alignment, as well as the team, is really the road to success. So I thought it was, anybody listening out there, those are the key aspects to success. I would definitely listen to that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And a couple of notes that I took away from this is, failure is definitely okay. It's okay to fail as long as you get up and do it again, right? And obviously, what you liked from our conversation is people motivation through inspiration. I think I definitely would use that in the future.
It almost sounds like a sports metaphor, right? Get up and do it again, and just keep persevering. So it's that way for everything. All right, cool. Well, this was another good one.
Yes.
Well, enjoy your weekend, and I'm sure
you too. Until the next time.
Exactly. All right.
Right.
Talk to you later.
Okay.
Man.
Bye.
Bye.
Subscribe for more insights from leading CGT experts.